Why did I draw a comic book? A self-critique part 2. We're gonna go through the first 4 pages in lightning blitz fast and gonna go over to the second part of this because this is the second clip. You can watch the previous part of it on the first clip if you want to, or well, this clip wouldn't make sense if you wouldn't watch the other one. So anyways, I'm gonna go through this really fast. It's pretty trashy, I have to admit, but then keep in mind, Rob Liefeld, who is actually very good at drawing. Rob Liefeld is the guy who created Deadpool, and he left with several other artists from reputed companies to start their own independent one. So there are some people who respect him, some people who think his art is cool. Cable, Deadpool, Shatterstar, all these characters were drawn by him. And then Jim Lee was around doing stuff on the same pages or sometimes different pages with Gambit. And Rob Liefeld was criticized by some people that because his proportions were not that great. But comics isn't about why did I start doing the comic book? I wanted to mention a little bit before I go into the rest of the story, because this isn't actually about the story. This is more about language for me, because this is written in my own language and I wanted to promote my own language. That was one thing I wanted to do. Also, the medium of comics, using pictures to tell a story that someone would understand. Like, my focus was I just wanted people to look at the pictures and get what was going on. But as I mentioned in the first clip, the first panels was so tight because I wanted to pack so much information into such little space, and I was just so afraid I was going to lose space. But there are advantages to that as well. So without further ado, I think I'm going to go into the story and the techniques that I try to use. And by showing you my mistakes, I could, someone who is inspiring to be a better comic writer than I was could probably look into this and, figure out certain things. Like, the art is crap. But you're going to see some things that kind of make sense, and I believe it's redeemable. So after 15 years, I'm doing the self-critique. My art is not as sucky now. All right, so what happens here, there's a bunch of dudes who are drinking tea and having a break. These guys just got into a fight. It'll be explained in the previous clip. There's a frog on his hand because the cover, the actual comic book is called The Frog. There's a dude in a frog suit or a diving suit. You can see the flippers on his boots and hands. He's drawn a little bit of like a Martian, but it's basically inspired by Spider-Man. There's going to be a lot of Spider-Man references and references to other things that people usually just get like that. So we'll see. So the same hand, the same frog you see at the very top of this page, you're going to see a frog resting on his hand, and this frog gets squished, and that leads into... that is like the MacGuffin of the story or whatever. That's the thing that drives things into motion. It's such a small detail, but none of the action that happens in this comic would be possible without that inciting incident. Or we'll talk about that when we get out O'Neill's Guide to Writing Comics, which I did not bring here the second to my little studio place. All right, so in the second page, we have this big fight where an accident takes place. They get into a little bit of a dispute over something personal, which will be explained when we read through the text in more detail, but I just want to go through the comic book once into a different section. So this is the first section, 4 pages. And then, as with the Spider-Man movie, the blood mixes with the blood. In the Spider-Man movie 2002, Tobey Maguire what happened was, like, after the spider bite, they had this little CGI thing where the DNA of the radioactive, genetically altered spider mixes in with the guy's blood. And I used red blood cells and a green stream of blood coming from the frog, which doesn't make sense because, the frog's blood is as red as ours is. We got the same blood. But for artistic effect, I wanted to draw two types of blood so that people understand what's going on. Comics aren't always factual. Language, for that matter, isn't always scientific, or if you expect too much from the real world to represent itself in the rules of language, you're not gonna see eye to eye on this with anyone. All right, so they get into a fight, and what they do is two of the dudes, so those are the first 2 pages, two of the dudes, the bully and his friend, they pack the body up of the person who they now think is dead because he's not breathing. He's probably in a coma or whatever, but they don't want to be responsible and they're about to leave. So they put him in a body bag or a sleeping bag and they throw them over a fence into a cemetery. These are headstones. And as the person in the body bag, as his consciousness fades away, he screams like, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, or stop, or something. He remembers what happens at the very end, but he's gonna have a little bit of amnesia as well. So they're packing up to go, and these guys are like, we're not ever gonna come back, and they trail off from this tea estate kind of place, which is kind of important in my country. And that brings us to the focus of this video, part 2. He wakes up from a nightmare where he sees a large toad or a frog, because the whole story is about the powers he gets is from a frog. And this is kind of reminiscent to the Tobey Maguire movie where he comes back home to Uncle Ben and Aunt May's. Uncle Ben is still alive. He goes up the stairs to his room, and then he's feeling a little feverish, so he collapses on the floor next to the bed. He clutches onto this bed sheet and he covers himself up. And as he goes to this fever-induced, we've all had that, when we're sick, we start to see different images in our heads and stuff. And I'm just sorry that I did that no pause button. I should cover this up. There you go. So this is actually from the movie itself. Peter Parker sees pictures in his head before he loses consciousness, and then he wakes up. So straight out of a body bag inside a cemetery, this is a cross. He wakes up and he's feeling crazy, and the night watchman or the security person from the graveyard shines a torch in his eyes, and it's like, oh my god, a dead body just woke up. And he's like, yeah, I sure am a devil. He says it's the devil or something. And he makes his first, this is the protagonist of our story, the good guy of our story, and he does his first murder. He actually consciously kills a fellow, and then he very emotionlessly steals his clothes too, because he's not wearing a shirt at this moment. He steals the rags of the night watchman before he leaves the graveyard. That is actually what happens in this panel. This is the second half of this. Is we're moving into the second chapter of this comic book in a way, and the action gets really it's pretty active compared to the first part, which you saw in the lines are all black and white, so it's really hard to kind of tell what's going on, I guess. But over here, and this image is very important. It's very cultural to me, because when I imagine funerals, I think of rain, and I think of, because when we go into houses, especially if it's a religious event or something sacred, auspicious, we tend to remove our shoes outside the door. So that's the door, that's the roof. This is a house and it's raining. And this guy, he's hiding behind a tree. He's looking toward his own house and he's thinking, all right, so everybody I know now believe that I am dead. My previous life is now over. I'm gonna have to live with. So here is a clip from here are some panels from the Clone Saga, where Ben Reilly, well, he hasn't picked his name out yet, but this is the clone of Spider-Man, or at least the guy who believes himself to be the clone, because neither of them actually know who the clone is. They just know that there's two of them. And over here it says he needs to grieve. He needs to feel sorry for himself for a while. It's raining and there are garbage cans everywhere. And let me get to the next picture. It's gonna make a lot of sense. Had this right here. ESU. Well, there's a place in this. So in this comic, the clone thinks to himself that he needs to let go of everything. Right here. It's raining again, and he's like, I'm gonna have to leave Aunt May and ESU, and I'm basically gonna have to leave my whole previous life behind and adapt to this new, like, he is a man without identity now, which Ann Nocenti thought was a great idea for Longshot. Longshot became an X-Man after a while. He comes from Mojo World, but he was first created by this creator called Ann Nocenti, and the title of the book was, Longshot, Man Without an Identity, Man Without a Name. He had amnesia, he had no idea who he was. And this guy just wakes up from, he literally dies and comes back to life. That is like, that isn't possible in real life, we know. But it is to say that, he has left everything that he knew about himself, and he has started as, so that's what happens in this. So this is a beginning of a new life, which is actually marked by the funeral. And over here, he's actually feeling sorry for himself. He's grieving for a moment, because this is a lot of truth to handle. Like, he's actually inches away from, he doesn't know if he's gonna keep going or if he's just gonna give up. And he does several shitty things now. He's already killed a person, so he feels bad about that as well. He's morally challenged. And then he starts stealing from other people as well. There's a purse over here. So this guy has a purse, and inside this purse, so he's just walking by, like, guy with a briefcase. He approaches the guy. So our main character is now a bum, which is looked down by society, and nobody respects a bum. In our society, but we do need to learn how to respect everybody, because we don't know their stories. We don't know how people end up on the street like this. So he's sitting on the side of a path, of a pretty wild path. Like, it's basically in the wilderness, so it's not that urban. It's pretty rural. And this guy, he doesn't notice the guy, or he doesn't pay attention to the guy. Maybe he is a little afraid, but just walks by, and there's too much distance for him to, grab or anything. But he reaches out his tongue, because he now has the powers of a frog, just like Spider-Man could shoot webbing from his hand, which, by the way, the movie gets wrong. In the comics, he has a web shooter, but we'll get to that later. The 2002 movie gets it wrong, but the other movies get it right. So anyways, he's stealing from this guy now. He's reaching into the back pocket of the briefcase, carrying a 9-to-5 guy. So this is 9-to-5 guy over here. He has a job. He has a social niche. He is, and underneath this coconut tree, and a backdrop of tall grasses, which you would see. So the vegetation in my comic, it is very important. It's like whenever the vegetation changes, the mood of the character changes too. When he's happy, you're going to see some trees. When he's not happy, you're going to see some trees. And this particular character is going to have a lot of coconut trees in his background. Another of them, instead of coconut, we're going to have something called a different kind of a palm tree, which is more prominent in the north side of Sri Lanka. It is to show, so they're all from the same city, but it is to represent something about themselves, an identity. Without, it's all in black and white because that wasn't necessarily my choice. Like the pictures are not colored in, so we don't have white people and we don't have black people. We don't actually have race in the story, but we do allude to certain clues about ethnicity and nationality, because we did have some things going on in our country right before 2009, and this comic book makes an attempt to address that as well, because people want us to be a little socially conscious, a little bit political, and as a teenager you're gonna hear these things as well, and these things were working in my mind anyway. So he has just committed a murder in the previous page. He killed a random night watchman at the graveyard, and we can just assume that the night watchman didn't have any kids. We don't know for sure, but we could just consider him like, we didn't know him much. And here he's about to commit his second murder. He goes over to a friend's place, a person who has a business. This is he walks into his store, which is a sports thing. You got badminton rackets and basketballs and another cricket bat. Cricket bats. We Sri Lankans, we love cricket bats. We love cricket. So cricket bats are everywhere, and this guy, he's good at all the sports. So he's running a sports store, and they have this brief conversation. There are kids in the store as well. He makes his way into the city, but he can't go around walking in rags. So he walks into his friend's place, and he's like, "Hey man, what's up?" And they have this little conversation between a jock and a nerd. Or this guy's not exactly a nerd, but he is more. The jock sees him as a nerd, just because, that's the normal storytelling vibe that people are looking for. And then there's a lot of text here. There's so much text here that confuses everyone, and since it's a language that you're not probably familiar with, you're probably not going to get what's going on. But as with all superheroes, as with Superman, as with Spider-Man, this dude's all like nobody should know who I am. They should never find out my secret identity. And in the shadows on the wall, you see our hero killing a second guy, his best friend, not his best friend, but a person that he knew for a long time. So by now, he's committed his third crime. He's killed a random dude. He has stolen from a random dude, and now he's killed again consciously. The first murder was kind of an accident. It was just like, if anyone shines a torch in your eye when you had just woken up from this traumatic experience in a graveyard, and when you've been abandoned by your friends and left for dead, you're gonna not think sober, and you're gonna, oh yeah, and this is actually something I did want to go through. Over here, there's an image of he literally looks insane here, and it's supposed to look a bit like the Hulk. And one of these kids I showed the comic book to, they were not old enough to understand the language, I guess. but they saw this one panel and they were like, yeah, that looks like the Hulk. And he was supposed to look like the Hulk, although we're alluding to Spider-Man in this story. This particular picture was supposed to look like the Hulk because the Hulk is a man without conscience. He's not Bruce Banner. He's crazy. He's out of it, you know? So that man was insane, but he is now a little more sane, but he is using the same excuse that he had before, and he's actually committing 2 murders with his own hands. Like, it's not like letting someone get away who ends up killing Uncle Ben. The guilt is on him. Like, you know, we're talking moral responsibility. We're talking about guilt and, you know, what is good, what is ethics. All of those things are coming into play. And next, he's got vengeance on his mind because in the first part of the story, there was this dude that he blames for ruining his life. His life is now ruined. He can't go back to the way he was living. And he hunts down a certain animal in the stream and he brings it to this guy's room because, you know, he knows where he lives. He creeps in through the window because he can crawl walls now. He's using his powers for evil, basically. So I wanted to explore the idea of what really makes a hero. And I mean, he's committed murder. And, you know, is usually we think that that is the one thing that people cannot be redeemed from, manslaughter. And he's coming in to make his third, like he's basically turned into something really, really terrible. And let's see how this goes. It's still not over, so I think I'll just I'll continue with this a little bit, just so you understand what's going to happen next. If only. Oh no, yeah, it's in this one. Right, so he creeps into this guy's apartment, and this is kind of important. Like I said in the first one, what they're wearing and everything is very important. Like, we get to see the inside of someone's house. There's a ceiling fan somewhere. He's supposed to have a ceiling fan because that's a ceiling fan, and that's a closet. That's a little cupboard or a half. Actually, I'm actually looking at the thing that I drew over here, right over there in this very room. So he's sleeping, and we'll see what he's actually wearing underneath his. So he comes to. This is supposed to be my Eddie Brock. He comes to in his sleep, and he finds a lamprey feeding on his chest. A lamprey that our main character, my protagonist, his name is Lushan. So this is the profile for my frog. So this is the frog, and it's all in English so that everyone can understand his real name. He's got a name. He's Lushan Ratnaika. Ratnaika is a very common last name, and I realize now that I could have gone for Anura because the zoological name for the order of frogs is Anura, and that is actually a name that is very common in my language as well. I should have just gone for that. But I wanted the name to kind of strike out and be unforgettable. You know, it's not something that you hear all the time. My name is Heshan, and this guy's name is Lushan, or Lushan, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So Eddie Brock wakes up with a lamprey latched onto his chest. It's like, what the hell, man? Like, so annoying, such a drag or whatever. And so there's this spiky thing above. Oh yeah, I got a lot of shit for this because, you know, the pictures seem to go down this way instead of down sideways. We're supposed to read it this way and then read it this way. And some people are like, why don't you use arrows? I guess I wanted the reader to kind of work for it. It actually confused me at this moment as well. So this is him front, and this is him sideways, and this spike thing falls onto his chest, killing the animal and mixing his blood with his blood. So Lushan now wants revenge. He doesn't just want the guy to die. He actually does feel guilty about the deaths of the other two people. So he couldn't bring himself to kill the third guy, but he did want this guy to suffer just as he did, because he blames this guy for stealing away the other guy's life. It's like, yeah, so it's vengeance. And he's wearing a sarong over here. This is what people in my country usually wear at home. It's like a long wraparound on your waist, and he falls into a garbage thing. And we'll continue this in clip number 3.